Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you my gluten-free beef enchiladas. And I'll be making a red sauce today, a red enchilada sauce. And I always like to make mine from scratch. I know fast and easy you can get it in a can from the grocery store, but I like to make my own. So I've got my crock pot here. Last night I put in a bunch of onions and garlic, salt and pepper, and a beef roast. And this was about a 3-pound beef roast. And then I just let it go all night long, about 12 hours. And I've been letting it sit here and kind of cool off a little bit, just so I can handle it. And I want to be able to strain the juices. I do have some beef stock here that will go in the sauce, but I want to use the juices that are from the meat. Give it some extra flavor. So I want to take my beef out very carefully. It's already falling apart. And this is the cut of beef that is really kind of marbled with fat. I don't know the exact, I want to say a chuck roast, but I don't remember exactly what cut of meat this is. And it's doing exactly what I wanted it to. I want to be able to shred it up, and it's just falling apart. I could have put seasonings in here besides salt and pepper, but because my sauce has so much seasoning in it, I didn't want to add any extra seasoning to my meat. And I always like to put it on a cookie sheet. It gives me a lot of room to shred it up, and then I can catch any juices that might come off of it on the cookie sheet. So now I'm just going to drain out my onions and my garlic. And see how much juice we get. Let me get this out of the way. And this was 2 medium-sized onions, and I think probably a whole head of garlic. So probably 10 to 12 cloves, maybe more. I don't like to throw those away. I'm going to put them in my food processor, blend them up so they're pretty smooth, and then we'll add it into our sauce. You don't have to do that, but they have so much good flavor. Why not? And then you don't have to waste them. And if I had a red or a green pepper or something, I would have cooked that in the crock pot too and done the same thing. And I don't care if there's a little bit of juice left in them to go in the food processor. It looks like applesauce. So that looks really good. I'm going to get my food processor out of the way. So that looks like about 2 cups of my stock. And then I've got another 2 cups over here. Usually the recipe is about 3 cups of stock, but because I'm putting in my vegetables, I may need to thin it out a little bit. And I got my knife out to see if I needed to cut up my beef, but I don't think I'm going to need to. So what I like to do, let me start with a couple of these smaller pieces here. I've got a couple of forks, and I like to just shred it apart. And if you've cooked your meat low and slow like I did, then it really will just fall apart. But look at that, shredding just the way I was hoping that it would. Now this kind of beef roast, it might not be the kind of beef roast that you want to serve for a Sunday dinner pot roast or something like that. But when you cook it like this, it shreds up so nice for enchiladas. And if I've got some really big fatty pieces here, I can move these to the side. But look at that, it's just shredding so easily. So I like to get all of my beef shredded up first. That way I can kind of focus on my sauce. You just take your fork and just start mashing it, and then it just shreds so easy. If I had thought about it a little bit more and planned ahead a little bit more, besides a red or a green pepper in my crock pot, I would have put some tomatoes. I have a quart-sized bag of tomatoes in my freezer. That would have been perfect in the crock pot, and then I wouldn't use tomato paste. But I didn't plan ahead for that, so we're using tomato paste today. So now that all of my beef is shredded, I'm going to move this out of the way. And for all of that, there's hardly any little gristly, fatty parts left. Didn't use my knife. Just set that aside. And then I do have a casserole dish here. It's not exactly a 9 by 13, but it holds the same amount as a 9 by 13. It's just a little bit taller sides. So kind of a deep dish. And then I like to use corn tortillas for this recipe. You could make any kind of tortilla that you like. My cassava flour tortillas would be really good in this, or even my original tortilla recipe way back a couple of years ago. Any tortilla that you use is really delicious with this recipe, but I just like the corn. So I have those sitting out, and I don't even care if they kind of dry out a little bit because I'm going to toast them in the oven. So to get our sauce going, I've got a lot of ingredients here. I've got a 1/4 cup of my gluten-free flour. I have, probably a good teaspoon, maybe 2 teaspoons of honey. I've got a teaspoon of apple cider vinegar. I've got 3 tablespoons of chili powder, 1 teaspoon of cumin, 1 teaspoon of coriander. I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of smoked paprika. I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt and pepper, 1/2 teaspoon of oregano, and a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne. I'm just gonna dump in my flour. If you didn't cook your roast with onions and garlic to make a puree like I did, you could add in however much onion powder and garlic powder that you like. Another thing I really like about this enchilada sauce recipe, you can make a really, really large batch and then put it in jars. I haven't canned it, but I usually put it in jars and then put it in my freezer. And then you've got enchilada sauce for whenever you want. So there's my dry ingredients. And I don't mind if there's extra fat in my beef drippings here. We're going to be making a roux, and I do have butter in my saucepan, but this extra fat in here just kind of gives it that extra beefy flavor. I like to mix all of my wet ingredients together. Then I can add them all into the saucepan at once. I don't have to go one at a time. In with my beef drippings and my onions and garlic, I'm going to dump in my tomato paste. And this is a 7-ounce can of tomato paste. And I do like a little bit of honey in here. It just goes with the spiciness of all the spices. And then apple cider vinegar. And then we'll just whisk this all together. Just makes it easier to stir in later. But you don't have to do this. So now that that is all mixed together, we'll just bring this closer. Bring my beef stock a little bit closer. I've got my 4-quart saucepan, and I've got a 1/4 cup of butter in there. And I'm going to turn this on, medium high. Once the butter is melted, I'm going to stir in my flour and my spices. What we're doing is making a roux. We want our flour and our spices to toast a little bit before we add in some of our beef stock. You don't want to burn your spices. I'm going to add in maybe a 1/2 cup, maybe a cup of my beef stock. Turn down the heat if you feel like you need to. And I like to add in a little bit at a time, just so it's easier to whisk in the dry ingredients. Once it looks like this, where it's really thick, I'm going to add in my pureed onions and garlic, tomato paste, and my beef drippings. I'm going to add in, about another cup of my beef stock. Now, if you're making this sauce and you don't use the pureed onions and garlic, your sauce will be a little bit thinner. Once I get most of the liquid in there, I can leave it alone for a few minutes and start getting my other things ready. I still have about a 1/2 cup of beef stock left if this thickens up too much and I want to thin it out. So I've got another cookie sheet and a cooling rack here. And sometimes tortillas get a little broken, and that's fine. And I like to do about 6 at a time. And I'm going to broil them and just get them a little bit toasty in the oven. And the way that I like to make my enchiladas is I like to layer it kind of like lasagna with the tortillas in the middle. And I like to start out with crispy tortillas because then they don't get super soggy in the sauce. If you like to roll up your enchiladas, do that. But for me, you're gonna cut it anyways, and once all the sauce and the cheese is on there, you can't really tell that it's in a roll anyways. So periodically stir your sauce. I've got it on about medium heat. Once it starts boiling, I will turn it down to a simmer. And then I got another cooling rack for my tortillas when they come out of the oven. Once they cool off, they dry out and get really crispy. And then I've got, about an 8-ounce chunk of Monterey Jack cheese, and then probably double that of Colby Jack cheese. You can use whatever cheese you like. I don't have any cheddar, so this is what I'm using today. And this is also really good with pepper jack if you like spicy. Don't forget about your tortillas. And then I kind of stack them, ski-wampus a little bit, so they can get some airflow. And then I've got enough tortillas to make 3 layers in my casserole dish. If you guys could smell that sauce, it smells so good. My sauce has been simmering, and it's just the right thickness that I want it to be. I didn't end up adding in any more beef stock. So I'm going to turn the heat off and bring it closer to me. I've got my ladle, and I've got my oven preheated to 350. Bring everything closer, and this is how thick my sauce is. I don't want it to be super thick, but I don't want it to be really thin either. So now I just layer in, about 6 tortillas here. And they're not like a tortilla chip, but they are a little bit firmer and crunchy than they were. So a layer of tortillas, and then just with my hands, I'm going to go a layer of my shredded beef. Now for some of our cheese. I could have put sauce on first, but that's all right. Now our next layer of tortillas. And just repeat. And you might be thinking to yourself, I have a lot more beef and I have a lot more cheese that will not fit into this pan. And you are right. The nice thing about making a recipe like this is I can actually make another casserole dish and throw it in the freezer. And then I've got dinner. If I have a busy day or you don't feel like cooking, then you've got dinner in the freezer ready to go. More sauce. Try to get it evenly on here. And then for my very last layer, it's just sauce and cheese. Now this is something that is to taste. If you like more sauce, add more sauce. If you don't like as much, don't add as much. And same thing with your meat and your cheese. Add as much or as little as you like. There we go. This will go in the oven. I'll start checking it at about 30 minutes. Everything's already cooked. You just want to melt your cheese and kind of heat everything through. So 30 minutes, the edges are bubbling, and you can see in the bottom it is bubbling too. Now I do kind of like to let it settle down a little bit before serving. But I'm going to get right in here. It smells absolutely delicious. looks so good. Now, if you had added in a lot more sauce than what I did, you might want to wait for it to set up a little bit more before serving it. Let's turn this around so you can see. It holds the slice so well. And I like to serve mine with sour cream. The enchilada sauce itself, it's really spicy, but not really hot spicy. It does have a little bit of heat to it, but it's mostly just spicy, not burn your face off spicy. And that also depends on you. You could add in as much heat as you like. But it sure looks good. And if you find that you've made it a little bit too spicy, sour cream really helps to cut the heat. And my tortillas are softer, but they're not just falling apart soggy. And that's exactly how I like them. Let's give it a bite. It's hot. It is so good. My beef is the perfect texture. And my sauce is absolutely delicious. And you don't have to make beef enchiladas with this sauce. You could do just a simple cheese enchilada. You could use shredded chicken. It really is so versatile. It's just a simple enchilada sauce, but so delicious. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. I hope you do. It really is such a delicious dinner. Let me know if you cook your beef in a crock pot like I did, and if you add onions and garlic to your sauce like I did. It really adds such a depth of flavor. Although this sauce is delicious with just garlic powder and onion powder in place of the onions and garlic. But why not use them? What are you going to do with them? Throw them away? Nowadays, food prices are so expensive, I try and use as much as I can. And that way you kind of get two uses out of your onions and garlic. It's all going in the same casserole anyways. It flavors your beef and it flavors your sauce. But thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.